Most homeowners believe HOA boards exist to protect communities. They assume board members act as neutral stewards, enforcing rules fairly and maintaining shared spaces in everyone's interest. That belief is comforting. It suggests structure, accountability, and balance. But it is also incomplete. The darker truth about HOA boards is not that they are inherently corrupt or malicious. It is that they operate inside a system that quietly rewards opacity, concentrates power, and discourages accountability. And most homeowners never see that system clearly enough to question it. HOA boards are typically composed of volunteers. On paper, this sounds reassuring. Volunteers imply civic duty, not self-interest. But in practice, volunteer status often removes scrutiny rather than inviting it. Board members are rarely trained in governance, law, or financial oversight. They rely heavily on management companies, templates, and inherited practices. Over time, those practices harden into norms that are followed not because they are correct, but because they are familiar. One of the most misunderstood aspects of HOA boards is how power actually functions. Authority does not flow from law downward into enforcement. It flows from silence upward into assumption. Boards gain leverage not by proving they are right, but by acting as if resistance is unlikely. When homeowners comply without questioning, enforcement becomes habitual. Habit then masquerades as legitimacy. This is why so many questionable decisions are framed as routine. Fee increases appear without discussion. Fines are issued repeatedly without review. Rules are enforced selectively. None of this happens in a dramatic way. It happens quietly, through emails, notices, and deadlines that feel administrative rather than confrontational. Each individual action seems too small to fight. Together, they create an environment where pushback feels exhausting. Another dark truth is that HOA boards often blur the line between governance and control. Decisions that should require board votes are announced unilaterally. Enforcement actions that should involve hearings are automated. Communication that should be transparent becomes selective. This is not always intentional abuse. It is often the result of convenience. But convenience is dangerous when paired with authority. Management companies amplify this problem. They operate as intermediaries, enforcing board directives while shielding board members from direct accountability. When enforcement is challenged, boards blame management. When management is questioned, it points back to board policy. Responsibility circulates without ever landing. That circular deflection is not accidental. It is structural. Perhaps the most uncomfortable truth is that HOA boards often function differently behind closed doors than they do in public. Homeowner-facing communications emphasize harmony, cooperation, and compliance. Internal discussions, by contrast, focus on leverage, exposure, and risk. Legal counsel is consulted not to resolve disputes, but to manage them. The goal becomes minimizing challenge rather than ensuring fairness. This is why transparency is so rare. Open records invite scrutiny. Scrutiny invites comparison. Comparison invites accountability. Boards that operate comfortably rarely welcome that chain of events. Instead, they rely on limited access to information. Meeting minutes are vague. Financials are summarized. Decisions are attributed to the board without documentation. The absence of detail is framed as efficiency. It is not. Another dark truth is how retaliation quietly functions inside HOAs. Officially, retaliation is prohibited. Unofficially, it is difficult to prove and easy to disguise. Increased scrutiny, faster enforcement, stricter interpretations. These actions are framed as neutral application of rules, but patterns emerge when documentation is compared. Homeowners who ask questions often receive more attention, not less. This creates a chilling effect. Many residents sense that pushing back will make their lives harder, even if they cannot point to a specific threat. That perception is enough. Boards rarely need to punish openly. The possibility of punishment does the work for them. Financial opacity deepens the problem. HOA budgets are complex, and complexity discourages engagement. Line items are grouped. Projections are vague. Reserves are discussed abstractly. Most homeowners do not have the time or expertise to analyze these documents closely. Boards know this. Financial decisions are often rushed through when attention is lowest, not when clarity is highest. And yet, when finances are examined carefully, patterns appear. Underfunded reserves, deferred maintenance, poor planning. The consequences of these issues are then shifted onto homeowners through sudden increases or emergency assessments. Accountability for the decisions that cause the shortfall is rarely discussed. The darkest truth may be this: HOA boards are not designed to be challenged easily. The structure favors incumbency. Meetings are procedural. Speaking time is limited. Agendas are controlled. Removal processes are cumbersome. Homeowners are fragmented and isolated. Boards, by contrast, operate as a unit. This imbalance makes systemic abuse possible even when no individual intends harm. But the system is not invincible. Every major HOA conflict that collapses follows the same pattern. A homeowner stops arguing emotionally and starts documenting structurally. Requests shift from complaints to records. Questions move from fairness to authority. Enforcement is compared to law, not policy. Silence is interpreted as evidence, not dismissal. When that happens, the power dynamic changes. Boards become cautious. Enforcement slows. Legal counsel intervenes. Practices are quietly adjusted. Rarely is wrongdoing admitted. Rarely is authority surrendered publicly. But behavior changes. And that change is the clearest indicator that something was wrong all along. The reason most people never talk about this is simple. HOA abuse does not look like abuse. It looks like paperwork. It looks like procedure. It looks like rules being followed. Only when those rules are placed under scrutiny does their fragility become visible. The dark truth is not that HOA boards are villains. It is that the system allows them to operate unchecked until someone forces it into the light. And most homeowners never do. But when one does, the illusion cracks. And once cracked, it never fully repairs. What most people never realize is that HOA boards rarely need to break the rules to cause harm. The system is designed so that harm can occur while everything appears technically compliant. Meetings are held. Notices are sent. Votes are recorded. On the surface, the machinery of governance keeps moving. But legality and legitimacy are not the same thing. One of the most damaging features of HOA governance is procedural complexity. Rules are layered across multiple documents: CC and RS, bylaws, rules and regulations, policies, resolutions. Each document references the others. This complexity is not always intentional, but it has a predictable effect. It discourages homeowners from engaging deeply. When understanding the system requires hours of reading and legal interpretation, most people opt out. Boards understand this dynamic intuitively. That is why enforcement often accelerates faster than explanation. Notices arrive before questions are answered. Deadlines appear before documentation is provided. The assumption is simple: pressure resolves disputes more efficiently than clarity. And most of the time, that assumption is correct. Another truth rarely discussed is how normalization works inside HOAs. Once a questionable practice is repeated enough times, it becomes accepted. Fines issued without hearings become routine. Inspections without notice feel ordinary. Fee increases without discussion become expected. New homeowners inherit a system where abnormal behavior is already normalized. They assume this is simply how HOAs operate. Normalization is powerful because it erases memory of alternatives. Boards often rely on this effect without consciously intending to. They inherit enforcement practices from previous boards and continue them out of convenience. Over time, no one remembers why a rule exists or how it was originally meant to function. Enforcement becomes detached from purpose. What remains is habit. That habit is reinforced by turnover. Homeowners move. Board members rotate. Management companies change. Institutional memory fragments. When disputes arise, no one can clearly explain why a policy exists, only that it does. That ambiguity favors authority. Challenging a rule becomes harder when its origins are unclear. Another uncomfortable truth is that HOA boards are rarely incentivized to admit mistakes. Admission creates risk. It invites scrutiny of past actions. It raises questions about refunds, reversals, and liability. Silence is safer. Quiet correction is safer. Letting an issue fade is safer than acknowledging it. This is why many HOA conflicts end without resolution statements. Rules stop being enforced. Notices stop arriving. Fines disappear. But no explanation is given. From the outside, it looks like compliance or coincidence. Internally, it is risk containment. The system adjusts without ever confessing fault. Homeowners often misinterpret this silence as victory or goodwill. In reality, it is calculation. Another layer of the problem is legal asymmetry. HOAs typically have access to legal counsel funded by collective dues. Homeowners must pay individually to defend themselves. This imbalance discourages escalation. Even when a homeowner is legally correct, the cost of proving it can feel prohibitive. Boards know this. That is why many enforcement strategies are designed to sit just below the threshold of litigation. Fines are kept modest. Penalties escalate slowly. Pressure accumulates over time. The goal is not to provoke a lawsuit, but to exhaust resistance. Most people comply long before reaching a legal breaking point. This strategy is rarely articulated openly, but it is visible in practice. What truly exposes the system is documentation. When homeowners shift from arguing outcomes to requesting records, the balance changes. Records demand accountability. They force decisions to exist on paper. They reveal gaps between policy and practice. Boards that operate comfortably in ambiguity struggle when clarity is required. This is why record requests are often delayed or resisted. Delayed responses, partial disclosures, vague summaries. Each tactic buys time and preserves uncertainty. But uncertainty is only effective when unchallenged. Persistent, structured documentation eventually collapses it. The deepest truth about HOA boards is that they are not inherently powerful. They are procedurally powerful. Their authority depends on systems functioning without interruption. When those systems are paused, examined, and compared to law, power becomes conditional. Most boards are unprepared for that moment. They are accustomed to compliance, not scrutiny. They are practiced at enforcement, not defense. When challenged methodically, their responses become cautious. Legal counsel intervenes. Language softens. Enforcement slows. The machine hesitates. That hesitation is the real signal. It shows where authority ends and assumption begins. What follows is rarely dramatic. There are no public apologies.
No resignations. No sweeping reforms.
Instead, practices quietly change. Notices are rewritten. Procedures are adjusted. Risks are avoided. The system evolves just enough to protect itself from further exposure. And then, eventually, the pressure resumes elsewhere. This is why HOA abuse persists. Not because it is unstoppable, but because it is rarely confronted at a structural level. Emotional disputes fade. Individual victories isolate. Systemic challenges are rare, but when they happen, they leave marks. Boards remember which questions cause problems. Management companies update templates. Attorneys adjust advice. The system becomes more cautious, not more just, but caution is still progress. The final truth most people never hear is this: HOA boards depend on disengagement. They function best when homeowners are busy, tired, and uninformed. Engagement threatens efficiency. Knowledge disrupts habit. Scrutiny destabilizes assumption. That is why the most powerful action a homeowner can take is not rebellion, but attention. Reading documents carefully. Asking precise questions. Requesting records. Comparing rules to law. These actions do not feel dramatic. They do not feel empowering in the moment, but they shift the foundation of authority quietly and permanently. HOA boards are not immune to accountability. They are simply accustomed to its absence. And once that absence is corrected, even briefly, the system never feels the same again.